I got a quick question for you. I got a few questions actually for you, Rachel Wisson. These are pretty quick questions, and I'm just curious as to like how you would answer them. So, uh, let me just ask you, which goddess do you think feminists are subconsciously worshiping today, and how do you think that affects daily politics?
Well, I don't have to guess, and I don't have to wonder if they're subconsciously worshiping. So, if you go
I'm
to
asking which
TikTok,
goddess
yes,
specifically.
I'm gonna tell you if you hush your sassy little mouth there. All you have to do is go to TikTok, which the user base is what, 85% female. Put in the hashtag witch talk or put in the hashtag goddess, and you will find millions of impressions, millions of women talking about the goddess Kali and how she's a symbol of women's liberation because she only accepted the blood sacrifice of men on the battlefield, and she's a vengeful,
Okay, so the answer to the
archetype
first
of
part of the
revenge
question is
against men.
Kali. And how do you think that is affecting daily politics?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. So it's more, it doesn't just affect politics, it affects the entire pop culture. So if you go to a Taylor Swift or
Specifically
a Beyonce
politics.
concert, why should we stick to politics? We're
Well,
talking about the
this is
population at
just the
large.
specific question. I got all sorts of questions for you because it's just, to
Sure.
me, it's so bizarre because I
It's
read
not
your book.
bizarre.
It's
It's
very
not bizarre at all.
disjointed. So
No, it's
like, I
not
just want
disjointed
you
at
just for
all.
the sake of the audience, right, to
Yeah,
explain
I'll explain.
that
I'll
it is
explain. But
Kali
you have
that
to be
it, and now you
quiet
have
or
to
else
tell me
I
what,
can't explain.
I want to give
how do
Rachel
you
a
think
chance.
that it affects daily
You asked
politics
me a question, so
specifically?
let me
All right.
answer.
All
I
right. We're
just
going
want
to
to
give
make sure that
Rachel,
you
we're
stay
going
on
to
the
give, hold on. All
rails.
right. First amendment. We got to give Rachel a chance to answer.
So, if you want to know expressly how it affects politics, you could look at all of the first female politicians that entered office under the banner of women's liberation, citing a lot of the early suffrage writers who wanted women to be liberated from men on the basis that Christianity was an oppressive force and that things like Gnosticism, spiritualism, and occultism were, and Lucifer specifically and openly was the symbol of women's liberation for first wave. So all of the women who were politically active marching for the 19th Amendment, there's an old saying that says there was never a suffragette who didn't sit around the seance table. My book goes over all of them. Susan B.
Yeah,
Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Matilda
yeah,
Joslyn Gage, all of the heroes of first wave were spiritualists, they were tarot card
yeah.
readers, they were automatic writers. So yes, they were very much into occultism and goddess worship. And there was a
Okay.
huge revival of
So,
this in the 70s. And Europe is
s-
filled with female
that
politicians
that's
who
great. That's
followed the
great, right?
goddess.
You've
I'm
answered my
answering your
question.
question. The
Yeah,
70s European female politicians, many of them who are all listed in the book, followed the goddess worship revival of the 70s, which was a huge
yeah.
like pop culture thing.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, it definitely affects the
Okay,
politics of
gotcha,
today.
gotcha. So, all right, let me ask you this. Are modern working women actually victims of a secret occult plot? Yes, that's a yes or no question.
Are modern working women victims of a secret occult plot? No, that's not.
Yeah.
You're trying to frame it. This
No,
is
I'm
about,
asking you, is that a yes or no? Very simple. I'm
it's
not
not a
framing
yes or no
anything.
question.
I'm just,
You're trying to frame
wh-
it in a way that I have to say
here,
yes or
ask
no
me the
to a
question.
question that you
Ask me the
framed that's
question. Are
absurd.
modern working women actually victims of a secret occult plot? I would say no. I would just say no immediately. Why does that
Okay.
require
But
nuance?
because there's a lot more to it.
All right,
All of
so explain it.
society, I'll explain it. All of society is governed by cultural engineering, marketing. Marketing. Would you disagree that marketing does not subliminally control what a lot of people do in their lives? Why do you go get the McDonald's?
I
Because
mean, I
you
don't
see the
think it
billboards, because you see the
subliminally
ads.
controls. I think it actively tries to influence your behavior, and you are
Yeah.
consciously aware of that. As far as like subliminal
No, that's
marketing,
not true. That's not true. A lot
there's
of
no
people are
empirical
not.
evidence that subliminal marketing works. Like
Yes, there
like there have
is.
been experiments done
Yes,
with like
there
the
is.
single frame thing and the popcorn, like trying to
No,
see if
that's
they
not what
would
I'm
get more.
talking about. You,
It's
sir,
not real.
you're
But I mean,
you're
I'm just
ignorant to
curious. Like,
this
are
topic.
modern working women victims of a
They're
secret
victims of
occult plot?
propaganda. No, they're victims of a century of propaganda propped up by billions of dollars in NGO money. That's
Which
what
is
they're
an
a victim
occult
of.
plot, right?
Some of the people who were involved in it had this belief, and that's why they
All
pushed
right,
it.
I'll take
Yes,
that as a
that's true.
yes. So then we're moving on. Okay. Do you believe that the CIA invented feminism as a form of mind control?
By
Yes
the
or
way,
no?
James, I'm only good with answering his line of interrogation if I get to interrogate him back.
You can
And if
interrogate
is,
me all you
if
want.
he has
Like,
to
Sure.
answer my
I'm just
questions
genuinely
as well.
curious about
All
these
right.
No, you're
positions.
not. You're
It's
full of
so
shit, and you're
wild
bad.
to me.
You are.
Rachel, is there a question you
it's
wanted
only
to
Wait, I'm
ask?
just
wild to
asking you simple questions. Go
Was
ahead,
there a
ask a
question
question.
you'd
I'll
like to
answer any
ask
question you got.
first?
It's only wild to you because you said you read my book and you didn't.
I did read your book.
You
Why do
didn't.
you think
Okay.
I'm asking you these
Okay, tell
pointed
me
Hold on, hold on.
one
questions?
thing you read
I
in
wanna
my
give
book.
you a
Tell me
chance.
something you read in my book.
What I mean, what am I going to like talk about specifically? You talked
Pick
about all
one
sorts
thing
of stuff.
out of the book
There's a
that you
lot of
thought
like
was
really there's a lot of really bizarre, disjointed things. Like I'm sitting
Like
here and
what?
I'm reading about a god in Egypt, right? In ancient Egypt, and you somehow push forward like 1,000 years talking about Celtic mythology and how like that there's like I don't
No.
know menstruation gods or whatever, or gods that
Nope.
desire to have like
None of that's in the book.
superiority in it. No, that what do you mean?
That's not in the book. There's no
Really?
menstruation gods. No. I don't know
So
what you're
hold on.
talking
So
about.
I just want to be clear, right? You never talked about pagan religions or goddess worship.
Sure
You
I
didn't
do,
talk
but I
about
didn't
like
say anything
Inanna or
about-
Lilith or Kali as symbols of female
Sure.
autonomy and power.
Of course I
did
do.
read your book. I did read it. Right?
Okay, why
I'm saying
do
that
I
there's like
say?
a lot of disjointed stuff where you try to
First
pair up
Amendment.
stuff.
We
That's
and it doesn't
heard that
work.
already. We heard that already. Rachel's got a new question.
So here's my question for you. Why did I bring those goddesses up in the book? If you read the book, why did I bring them up?
I don't know. I think in your brain
You didn't read
that
the book.
You
You
have
didn't
this
read the book.
belief.
Stop lying. Stop
I
lying.
did read the book. I did. It's not
You
a
didn't
long
read
book.
it. Okay, what's at the
It's not a
end?
long book.
What do I wrap it with? Just in general.
I honestly I don't remember off the top of my head, but I did
No,
read your
you don't.
book.
You didn't
Right?
read the book.
It's been to be fair,
All right,
right?
let's say maybe he just read
planned,
selections.
right, on
like
actually
he's-
reading your book, and then within the next day,
And then you didn't.
while
And
it
then
was
you
This is
fresh,
like
I read your book. What do you want? Do you need a
Just a-
screenshot?
You can't
Okay,
tell
my
me what the
gosh,
book
like-
is about. You can't tell me anything that's
Okay,
in it. You
I hate
can't
to
tell
do
me
I
this.
what
literally
What I
just
have to do
listed
is-
exactly what was in it.
Okay, pardon my muting you both. Just to be sure that we get back to the topic of whether or not contemporary feminism is helping women, let's just settle, like maybe meet halfway and say that maybe First Amender read selections of the book, whether they be large or small, is up for debate, but we'll shelf that topic for whether or not the selections were large or small for another time. And then let's return back to the topic here. So I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then we'll go back to whether or not feminism today is helping women.
Okay, so since you already asked me a bunch of questions, I have one for you. Where do you think feminism came from? How did we get feminism? You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
That's a different question. It depends on what particular culture you're talking about. I think there's
Okay,
a lot
the
of
West.
separation that existed
In the West.
Mary Wollstonecraft. It likely started from Mary Wollstonecraft, and then that would be what we would consider modern contemporary feminism, which, by the way, I should point out, is a Christian deist. I don't know how you in the book, like you did label it as like occultism regarding Mary Wollstonecraft because that they were a deist, but I'm a little lost because what they would say that they basically gave their life to Jesus Christ. And they would also say that there is a God, but that the God doesn't actually influence itself. And that's somehow the occult. I don't know how you pair up like specifically like Kali like 1,000 years ago and then move all the way to Mary Wollstonecraft that has completely different ideas and then say
James said
somehow
he wanted to shelve the topic of the book. So unless you want me to explain how I know you didn't read the book, because that's what the book is me explaining the connection. That's literally what the book is.
Let me help
you. So
you
if you
out.
don't know how I connect it, you didn't read it. So do you think feminism was a reaction to patriarchy and abuses by the evil patriarchy?
I'm going to share this real quick and I want everybody to see it. I want everybody to see it.
Just to be
Just
sure,
because you
I don't wanna
downloaded
be-
it or whatever doesn't
Right?
mean you read it.
What is that? Hold on. What is that? What does that say? Let me help you out. What does that say there?
Doesn't mean that
Okay.
you paid
Can
any
you just look
attention
at
that
that?
you know
Hold
what's
on,
in
I
it.
hate
just-
to do
It
can
this.
you
means
just
nothing.
admit that I did read your book?
No.
Can you just
because you
admit that
don't
I
know
read your
what's
book?
in it.
Pardon my muting you both again. So, okay. It's not quite as exciting to debate whether or not First Amender sat in his little flannel pajamas and read your book, Rachel. So I think it would be more interesting, more exciting, rather than imagining him in his little jammies reading your book, debating whether or not that happened. Is feminism today, are the things, let's say even maybe in first wave feminism, have they helped women or have they hurt women
I
or
would love
neither?
to do that, but he keeps asking me to explain my book. So tell him to stop doing that, and I'm happy to ask. All you gave us was plot points on a graph saying, oh, this obviously proves that everything's better for women. Okay, then why do we have a little something called the National Incidence Study, which goes over 45 years of data, the most comprehensive data collected by all of the bureaus in the United States, everything from police to first responders to school psychologists, everybody who reports on any type of abuse is included in the National Incidence Study. And this study over 45 years shows that women and children both have not experienced less abuse, but have experienced increasing and more abuse as divorce and single parent families and single motherhood has been on the rise. So it shows, what all of this data shows is that the safest place for a woman is with her husband, not with a cohabitating partner, not alone, not divorced, not with her second boyfriend after she got the divorce, with her husband. And feminism was specifically one of the main tenets of first and second wave was to separate women from marriage, to make it easier to get out, to make it easier to break up. So how can you say women are better off when we are objectively at higher risk of all types of domestic violence, when this is one of the main promises of
Actually,
feminism?
other way around. When you don't have feminism, it's actually higher in terms of
Not true.
domestic violence.
I just explained to you that
100%
that
false.
wasn't true.
You're wrong.
Okay,
so
explain.
here's the thing, right? Like my
Prove it.
argument, like if you want to deal
Prove
with
it. No, you just made a claim. You have to prove it. You said that I was
you
wrong.
want me to
Prove
just sit
it.
there
Show
and
the
like look up a
data.
study, or can we like actually go back and forth
I have
on
a
this?
study right here. I have the National
Was
Incidence
that was
Study,
all
which
white? What was that?
there's the National Incidence Study, which is this, I just explained what it is, huge government survey of all reporting agencies that have any types of reports of abuse of women and children, says that the safest place for women from 1970 to now, when they started recording this, is with their married spouse. And that to the extent that women get divorced, stay single, cohabitate with a partner is actually one of the most dangerous things. This was stigmatized before feminism. And now with women's liberation and no-fault divorce and just live with your boyfriend and have his babies, women are experiencing higher volumes of abuse than they did prior. Do you have data that proves that wrong?
So I just want to be clear, right? Like the IPV or intimate partner violence, since there, would you say that there's, let me back up. Is there more domestic violence now or less?
Now, from when to when? Because it depends. They haven't
Say
been tracking this stuff forever.
Let's say from the 1990s to today.
From the 1990s to today, overall, is there more or less? It's remained remarkably
Is there
stagnant
more or less
since the
feminism
60s.
in your mind?
There's more feminism, and domestic violence has stayed about the same for 45 years. It's just stagnated, the overall level.
So if I pull up a study regarding the intimate partner violence and find that it has declined significantly from the 90s to the 2010s, you would just say that you're wrong about that?
I would say that I've done an extensive investigating into that, and it depends whose data you look at, which is why I went with the NIS. Yes, this is true. So there are certain places that you can report to that show this, but it's not comprehensive data. It doesn't go over everything. The NIS is comprehensive. It takes every type of reporting place that handles these kinds of complaints and shows that the overall rate has not changed much, because like the IPV doesn't always take into account all types of violence. It doesn't take into account all types of reporting. I had a big kerfuffle with I think it was Trent Horn about this, where he and I went back and forth, and actually he ended up saying, okay, yes, you're correct. The NIS is much more comprehensive. It actually shows that the overall rate is stagnant. It's been about the same for the last 50 years. And that the only places where there's less is in married families with both biological parents living with the children. Every other living situation is far more dangerous to both women and children, up to a factor of 12 times. So
I mean,
children who live
I don't
with
know what
non-married
what to tell
parents,
you here. I mean, you're just wrong.
I'm not just wrong.
I
You
mean,
can
like
go
here,
to if
I'll go ahead and share it so that way everybody can see it. Like I'm not blowing smoke up your bum when I'm
I
sitting here
can bring
pointing
up
to you
mine too if you
that
want.
indeed it is lower. Violence is lower than in the past.
No,
It had lowered
no,
quite
no,
a
no.
bit,
Wait.
right?
Look. See, this is what I'm talking about. It says women killed by intimate partners using guns and other methods.
Yeah. I
That's
mean, but
not
there's
the
more
same.
feminism now. So then why is
That
the
is not,
inverse the
listen,
correlatory?
women killed is not the same as overall domestic violence. Most women who experience domestic violence
I
are
mean, do you
never
need
killed.
overall domestic violence? A lot of that
Yes,
goes unreported. How would you even know that?
because of everything that is reported by all agencies, go to the National Incident Study or go to my Substack, which has all of these links and it has the charts and it has the graphs in one of my articles
All
that
right.
shows
Well,
this
so then what you need to have, right, is like
is
basically
overall domestic
if I
violence.
show you information that is antithetical to your
That's
position,
no,
you
that's not
say, well, that's
antithetical.
not
That
good
is one
enough.
metric.
I
No,
only need my own.
that's not
Well,
good enough. It's
how are
one
you
metric.
exactly going to measure that? A lot of this goes
I'm explaining
unreported.
it. James, he won't stop talking ever. He asked me a question and I can't answer. And he did this with Andrew and he did this with Jim Bob. He speed prattles over you.
I want
Saying
to give
that
Rachel
because the
plenty of
saying that
time.
because the number of deaths has declined a little bit since the 90s is not indicative of the overall rate of domestic violence because deaths are a tiny fraction. I think it's like 2% or less of all domestic violence victims are ever killed by the person who is doing the violence to them. Okay. So the overall domestic violence rate has stagnated for 45 years and it has increased in every type of living situation except married biological parents with the children. That is by far the safest. Do you dispute that? Do you dispute that the safest living situation for women and children is in a home with both biological parents who are married? Do you dispute that?
Uh, there does appear to be a correlation to that, and that's
No,
fair.
it's not just a correlation.
No, it
It's
is a
an
correlation
overwhelm.
because
No, it's
normally
not.
when
It's an
you're together and you have more
overwhelming.
money because you're
Okay.
together, then it would be likely that you would actually not have as much violence.
I'll just read it
Okay.
here.
That would
All right,
logically
one sec.
follow.
Okay, let's hear. Okay, let's give Rachel a chance to respond to that. You had just explained why you think there is a correlation there, First Amender. Let's give Rachel a chance to respond to that.
Okay, so I've got my Substack pulled up here. It's rwilson.substack.com. It's a piece called 45 Years of Data Proving That Fathers Are Not the Threat. And it says that children living with single parent with an unmarried partner had the highest incidence of physical abuse by far, more than 10 times the lowest rate. Only 0.7 per 1,000 children living with two married biological parents were sexually abused compared to 12.1 per 1,000 of children living with a single parent who had an unmarried partner. When it comes to emotional abuse, the rate of 15 per 1,000 kids living with a single parent with an unmarried partner is more than 8 times higher than the rate for kids living with both married biological parents. The rate of physical neglect, 7 times higher for kids who are in broken families. The incidence of children who suffered serious harm and endangerment was 9.5 times higher. And it continues. Now, here's probably the most relevant statistic. 68% of kids who were maltreated in these studies, this huge meta study, were maltreated by a female, whereas 48% were maltreated by a male. So this idea that the threat was men or the threat was husbands or the threat was fathers is a lie. It's a lie of feminist propaganda. It is not your married husband and the father of your children who is the threat. It's the guy that you shack up with after your divorce. It's the dude who you let into the situation after you divorce your husband because they're looking for women and children who are vulnerable. Okay. So you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just pull up one stat of like just women who are killed. That does not give you the full picture.
All right, great, fabulous. Let's prove you wrong again. I do love that goalpost shifting, though. That's fun. I'll go ahead and provide
shifting
it.
at all. You're the one
Here,
who
here
shifted
we
the
go. Ready?
goalpost by saying you have to just go by this one metric, which is women who are killed.
Shh, listen, the men are talking. The men are talking.
You're a little boy. You're not
So
a
if you
man.
look right here, if you observe right here, you can see that there appears to be the offending and victimization rates between 1976 to 2017. The current explanation as to what that spike
Wait, what's
is
the source?
to
What are we
later
looking
on.
at?
Oh,
I need to know what we're looking at.
Yes, this is a paper called Gender Differences in the Patterns and Trends of U.S. Homicide between 1976 to 2017.
So it's just homicide again.
This is a
It's just
no,
homicide.
well, no,
We're
no,
talking
but
about
no,
abuse.
you're wrong. You're wrong. Right. Also, this includes abuse because it's talking about offending and victimization rates. So yes, it is also including abuse. It's also lower. Again, there's more
doesn't show me
feminism,
that.
right? But we don't see this sudden rise. However, it is fair to say that we can say
There's not a sudden
that there has
rise.
been a sudden rise. And yeah, it's down. Yeah, no crap, it's down.
No,
exactly.
it's stagnated.
Your
No,
argument.
you're wrong.
No,
You're wrong.
how is that stagnated? How is that trend that is obviously going down?
That's
How is that?
just
How exactly
that is
is that
not
it's
an
stagnated?
overall rate of abuse. That is not an overall intimate partner violence stat. That is just offending and victimization rates for men. That's the
I
graph
love
I'm
it.
looking
No,
at.
no.
You're
Oh,
wrong.
if you here, let me help you out with your reading. Okay. If you'll notice right here under figure 2, it says offending and victimization rates for women. And you'll notice it's very similar. Right?
Go
it's
up,
the same
scroll
thing.
up.
And you'll notice that as there has been since the 1990s, right, there was actually laws that were passed specifically outlawing specific violence against women. There had been laws that have been passed. And then the result is there's less victims. Oh, what do you know? More feminism has resulted in less victimization, less harm to women, right? Now what, Rachel? What?
Now what?
What? I'm
Shut
showing
up.
you
It's
the
my
papers.
turn to respond.
I'm showing you the information. This is wild. You're like in La La Land.
You're going to have to mute him.
You're in La La Land.
You're going to have to mute him. He's once again, because he doesn't know the overall stats and the data, he's pulling up a random thing. Oh, look at the chart go down. Yeah, the chart is, he didn't scroll up to show us what offender and victimization means, how they calculated that, who collected it, what the population size was, nothing. I'm talking about overall domestic violence rates in the most comprehensive data that we have. We don't even know what we're looking at when he shows us that. He just shows us a line that goes down and it says victim and offender. That doesn't tell us anything. So we're talking about if feminism has protected women, then why is the overall domestic violence rate for women and children the same after 45 years? And if you want to know for sure, pull up the National Incident Study yourself. Go to the federal government website and pull it up. And it will show you that it is the most comprehensive data set that we have. Okay.
It's
whatever
not the
you
same.
were just looking at, you didn't let me look at the intro. You didn't let me look at the methods. I can't on the screen right now see the full view of what you're talking about, but I can show you this. Okay. On top of this, we have 2 huge studies. Have you ever heard of the paradox of declining female happiness? This is a huge study that came out in 2008. You ever heard of it? No. Okay, he's never heard of it. The paradox of declining female happiness opens with this. And this is a meta study across multiple cultures, and focuses on the United States. And then there's a second follow-up study they did that was much more comprehensive and looked at the whole world. By many objective measures, the lives of women in the United States has improved over the past 35 years, yet we show that measures of subjective well-being indicate that women's happiness has declined, both absolutely and relatively to men. The paradox of women's declining relative well-being is found across various data sets, measure of subjective well-being, and is pervasive across demographic groups and industrialized countries. Relative declines in female happiness have eroded a gender gap in happiness in which women in the 1970s reported higher subjective well-being than did men. These declines have continued, and a new gender gap is emerging, one with higher subjective well-being for men. So women are not happier. They're not reporting that they're doing better. So are you going to tell me the women are wrong?
Post link.
How do I do that on Zoom? How do I do that on Zoom?
While that link is posted, folks, want to remind you first, thanks so much for your likes. We're already at 214, and Nora in the live chat said if we get to 250 likes, he would email everyone in chat his lewd and lascivious foot pics, quote unquote. Nasty guy, but hey, we appreciate your likes anyway. we'll give Rachel a chance to share that link with First Amender. And when the bars are up over First Amender on screen, that's not meant to apply that he's first offender. We want to be clear, he's not an offender. He's not a pervert. Is the bars just signify if someone's muted. So, which we appreciate. I want to give I got to give credit because it's true that First Amender, he has a way with people. Everybody by the end of the debate, they're just enraged and they just want to look at his little face. He just is
Okay, I have
nonetheless.
the link, but I don't use Zoom a lot. Where do I share it? Is there like a chat?
Yeah, you should see a button that says chat.
Oh, I see
you
it.
click
I
it,
see it.
and then you can just paste it. And you
Okay.
could see that I have the one where you could just see the paper itself, and then where it was actually published in libertpub.com. Anyway, let's take a look at your Yale paper.
Back to First Amender. You just want to face. But the point is, I got to give him credit. He comes back here every time, even though they can, the chat sometimes, not everybody in chat, but some of them. And then also sometimes the speakers, I remember a little 2-on-2 debate, Alex Stein and Isabella Riley. They tore into First Amender good. They called him first offender among many other things. But again, he's not an offender. Thanks for your super chat. Bite me, XD. Uh-oh, says Rachel, you're wasting your time on this low testosterone crying. Is pinko a bad word? What's pinko mean?
I don't care. I don't care. It's just a dumb ad hominem.
Okay, well, don't worry. They're not done. He said he's a secretion from a cockroaches. Oh my, we can't say that word. YouTube has become more. I'll give Rachel a chance to respond to First Amenders if you're ready, Rachel. Otherwise, I can keep.
Yeah, I've posted a link to the Paradox of Declining Female Happiness and the 2022 follow-up study, which amusingly states by the authors, we find that one part of the female happiness paradox is very robust. When answering questions about negative affect, women are always and everywhere more unhappy than men. This is true across time, country, and across different metrics of negative affect. LOL.
So, Rachel, your
Pretty
paper
funny.
doesn't actually really address specifically violence against women.
No, it's overall happiness.
So,
since
okay,
you and I
hold on.
can't agree about violence, I thought we'd just go to, are women happier? You said it was better.
Here's
for
the
them,
thing, Rachel.
Women are saying they're not happier.
There's a decline in reported happiness. That's fair. I was not even contesting that concept.
Well, then
however,
how
when
could
I'm referring to the violence
if
against,
they're less happy?
Well, I think
If
there's
they're
probably
worse.
more to life than just simply happiness, and there's probably certain life satisfactions that cause that to be the case. I mean, there's a current increased expectations in role expansion, specifically in your paper that you have listed, where they're saying that women's roles has expanded beyond traditional boundaries, which encompasses both career as well as familial responsibility, and that the pressure to have it all have led to increased stress and decreased overall happiness. I wouldn't even necessarily disagree with that. I think if you're like doubling the overall workload from like being stay-at-home to being stay-at-home mom and working a full-time job would absolutely increase that, right? Pick one or the other, not do both, or at least share the workload with men. That's perfectly like that would be fine. The work-life balance challenge appears to be the concern regarding your paper. If you're talking about the emotional labor as well as household responsibilities, if anything, like people where it's like expected that the woman must be the one that deals with the household responsibility. It's that kind of mentality on top of having to work, which would result in this unhappiness when really the working in the house and doing housework, that's not just woman's work. That's also men's work, right? It's a team effort. Right.
Okay.
And that would result in better happiness, I think, in my opinion.
I have to ask you then, is women's right to work, did like feminists fight for women to have the right to work? Is working a privilege, a right that we fought for?
Yes.
Okay. Then how can it be a right and a privilege, but it's also like a burden that makes life harder
right.
for us?
I wouldn't necessarily call working a privilege because you kind of need to do it in order to like survive.
But why didn't we need to do it before 1970? Why didn't women need to work outside the home before 1970?
That's actually That's a really complex question.
It's
I think
actually
it has to
pretty
do with a
simple.
myriad of factors. I do believe that we had created the Milton Friedmans of the world and the Margaret Thatchers of the world that decided to erode away at unions and make it a lot harder for people to be
No.
able to make ends meet,
Nope. It's
which then
actually very
resulted
simple.
in.
Do you want
Is
to
it
know
really?
the answer?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the answer.
Yeah,
The
go
answer
for
is
it.
because we pushed women after the creation of gender studies in 1970, the publishing of Ms. Magazine, and this huge campaign by now to push women into the workforce. We doubled the workforce almost overnight. Within a span of about 10 to 15 years, women flooded the workforce, doubled the labor force, wages have never recovered, and we now have a two-income economy. So in the 60s and all of human history prior, you could raise a family with
So you don't have it. You don't think that has anything to do with the fact that we've eroded away at unions?
No,
Can
I
women
don't.
be bosses? Can they make businesses? Are women capable of making businesses?
Are they capable of making
Yeah.
businesses?
Can they make
Sure.
businesses?
Yes.
Okay. So if you double the workforce and you double the amount of people that makes businesses, wouldn't that increase?
No.
standards?
What percentage of the workforce is people who own businesses? It's a very small amount. And guess what?
Yeah, but there would be an increased amount, would there not be?
Women don't. Yeah, some women own businesses.
Okay,
but
so then it would
it's
just
still
be additional trade and it would result in higher quality living outcomes.
And have you ever looked?
We've
have you ever
observed this in the
looked at
past,
the
I mean, I think
happiness
it was
level of
like during the Islamic golden age,
Hold on, I
it
do
was
want
one
to
of the
just
only
be sure.
societies. What?
Just to be sure that Rachel has a chance to speak as well, because I do appreciate your passion, First Amender, but sometimes I just want to be sure that there's approximately equal input during the open dialogue. We'll let you get back to that thought.
Let's get to the crux of the matter here rather than quibbling over economics, which we could do all night and we're not going to agree. There's this inescapable fact of biology, which is that there's only one sex that can have the babies, and that is women. And women and you, sir, First Amender, have been told this lie that there's nothing more to motherhood than 9 months, you pop out the baby, and then it's a nights and weekends thing that you can do around your job, you can do it around owning a business, you can have it all. And as a woman who's had 5 children, I will tell you,
said that?
motherhood is not a part-time nights and weekends gig.
Motherhood is a lifetime thing.
Of course it is. And tell me how it makes sense for us to outsource the raising of our children to low-wage daycare workers rather than the woman who is the mother raising the kids.
Because people have to work.
You're going to give it to a random other woman. Now,
Well,
this
because people
woman
have
is
to work.
burdened.
And just so
Now
you're
this-
aware, right? Like
Shush,
prior to the
you're not letting me
1970s,
finish. You're not
women
letting
still
me
had to
finish.
work.
Hold on one
He's
second.
not-
Let's just give
he's not letting me finish.
Rachel a chance to finish this sentence, and then we'll go back to you on the point you had, First Amender.
Up until women's liberation and pushing moms into the workforce, we didn't have massive daycares everywhere, and the children were raised by their mother. Some idiot well, I know who. It was idiots at Ms. Magazine and the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation who wanted to double the workforce, stagnate the wages, tax the other half of the public, and put all the children into state-run schools. They decided, we'll just convince the women that it actually makes sense to pay some woman $11 an hour to raise your child. Okay, well, what about that woman? Why doesn't she get to run a business? Why doesn't she get to have the fancy corner office and close the deal over brunch?
Rachel, I've got
so
news
this
for
is
you.
the most
Women had-
inefficient,
Let's kick it over.
ridiculous system, and it's not going to last.
Rachel,
It won't last.
I got news for you, Rachel. Women had always worked throughout history, and I'll tell you how that's even possible.
Like I haven't
the
heard
people
this
that
one
you're
before.
talking about with the man goes to work and the woman stays at home. That was typically people who are upper middle class and up.
Nope.
Regular people, they worked. Women worked. Do you think women weren't there working in factories in the 1910s? They were. Right?
Do you know
Throughout the 1910s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s,
How many?
women worked.
How many?
A majority of women
stats?
worked.
Nope.
Over
that is
50%.
incorrect. Nope, you are wrong, sir. The
All right.
statistics you are wrong.
Yeah, but
Okay,
I mean, I
so-
can't trust you and your statistics because, like, anytime I
look
throw
it
a
up.
statistic at
Okay.
you just say, well, this exact opposite thing that actually has nothing to do with what we were originally
Nope,
talking about
you're-
is actually the
sir,
case.
Why don't you? There's nothing wrong with admitting
Your
that you
argument,
don't know.
right, didn't even have in your paper, right, regarding happiness, didn't even address that violence is lower among women now, even though there's more feminism now, right? So, do you believe that more violence is more violence good for women, or is less violence good for women? I would say less, right? It's fair to say that.
That was not did you just give me a statistic for overall violence, or was it just murders? Because
Yeah,
that's
no,
what you did before.
I did give you a statistic for overall violence. Yes. Do you need it?
From
Do you
where?
need me to show you the chart
Yes.
again?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can look at right there where it says, here is mine, sci-hub.ru right there. You can see the actual paper right there. If you just scroll down, you will see that it actually has the exact thing that you're looking for. Figure 2, offending victimization rates for women. Remember that?
Yeah, I can't go through your
it's
whole
down
study.
now. No, it's literally a single chart. I'm
Where
not
is
asking
it?
you to
Okay,
look at the entire
but what
study.
okay, if you want to do this, James is not going to like it, but okay, we'll go over what's the definition of offenders. Okay, let's go back to the top. After declining,
Wow.
So we have,
Yeah.
he wants me to sit here and read and find out the definitions and figure out what that means, because we don't know what offending and victimization rates are. We don't know. Does that include all types of violence? Is it just fatal violence? Does it include rape? We don't know. So we're going to have to go dig through. But just to go back to what he was saying that was incorrect from my book here, and this
All right, but I mean, is it fair to say that
wait a minute,
the
let me
homicide and
respond to-
victimization rates is lower now, right?
No, it's not. That is, I can't look at that.
Numby, go down. What do I'm literally saying the offending and victimization rates is down now than it was in 1976.
What does offending and victimization rate mean? What does that term mean?
We could talk
Go
about
to the
that,
definition
but
and
it
read
is
it
fair
me.
to say, under the definition that is in here in the
James.
paper, offending and victimization rates for women is down, right?
No,
We're not in make-believe land.
What?
We're in
Right.
reality
Hold on.
land,
All
right?
First Amender, let's hear from Rachel.
Everybody saw the chart.
No, First Amender, you're not Rachel. Shut up for a second.
What he needs to do, if he wants me to contend with that data, he has to go up to the part of the study where they give you the definitions for the terms, and he has to tell me what they mean by offender and victimization. What does it include? How did they collect it? Where is it from? Because the NIS study, which is bigger than this one tiny study he's got, it's a meta study of everything, says that the overall rate of violence against women has stagnated and has been the same for 45 years. And that's from the US government. It's the most comprehensive data set there is. So if he wants me to contend with that, tell me what offenders and victimization means, because we don't know what that includes or how they put that together. However, you are wrong about women having always worked. Now, when people say women always worked, they're usually saying on their own homesteads with their husband. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, when your husband was like a blacksmith making horseshoes and you were milking the goats and everyone was on the homestead. Yes, but after the Industrial Revolution, absolutely not. In the United States, in 1940, the number of children under age 6 with mothers working full-time outside the home was 6%, sir. So no, it has not always been this way. Everyone's mom didn't work. I'm 44 and I was born in 1980. And when I was growing up, most kids' moms were still at home. It wasn't until the 90s that it became more than half of my friends whose moms were always working outside the home. You're wrong. Just admit you're wrong.
What year was that you said that it was like 5% or whatever?
In 1940, the number of children under age 6 with mothers working full-time outside the home was 6%. By 2013, that number jumped tenfold to 58%. This is brand new shit. Everybody wasn't raised by the daycare, sir. That's brand new shit, and it's catastrophically bad. Broken homes, daycares. Do you want me to go over the statistics for kids who are raised without their dad in the home? Would you like to talk about that? Because I think the happiness of children matters, and I think it matters to the happiness of their mothers. So 90% of kids.
From what I'm looking
homeless,
at, in 1940, 27% of women age 16 and over were in the labor force.
Yeah,
and
I'm talking
through 1945,
about mothers.
during World War II.
We're talking about mothers. See, he doesn't know how to read data.
So it has to be specifically mothers? Why are you cherry picking data as opposed to just looking all women? I was talking about women in the labor force.
Because you said the burden, the reason women were unhappy is because they have to work and raise kids, and that it shouldn't be both. And that
I think I would be fair to say that generally speaking, if a woman has a child, then, and they can actually afford to be helping the child at home, then yeah, it would result. I mean, again, this really comes
And
down to
wouldn't
like
more
throughout the
women be able to
1950s.
afford that?
Wouldn't throughout the
Wouldn't?
1950s, stop talking. Wouldn't throughout the 1950s that there would have happened unionization where your rights of how much that you were getting paid, as well as like workplace conditions, that was actually negotiated, that would allow or enable women to be able to be stay-at-home moms? Do you think that that's possible?
What did you say at the first part? In the 1950s, what?
Okay, if you have unions that are able to
Yeah.
negotiate the wages, right?
It's not a
wouldn't
lack
that
of
mean
unions.
wouldn't that mean that since that they're getting paid more money, women can have the choice if they want to be stay-at-home mothers?
That would be nice, but that's not what crushed men's wages. What crushed men's wages was sending all the women to college.
Women worked in the past.
No, not then. I just told
Yes,
you
they
that
did.
no, they didn't. Not in
You
large
said not
numbers.
mothers,
Okay, hold
but
on.
I
We
showed you
okay.
women, and it
Hold
is
on.
that.
You
We,
said
all right,
16.
one sec. I
You
hate to
have
do
to
this.
mute him. He
So,
just
okay,
won't let
hold
me
on one
talk.
sec.
So
I'm
I'll
just gonna quick
explain
jump
it.
in. Okay. So one of you is saying yes, they did in the past. One of you is saying no, they didn't. Okay, we got that. Who is it? We'll go to first Rachel. Rachel, this is there. I don't know if you know if you're on mute. So we'll give you a chance. Let's go with Rachel first. You're unmuted, Rachel, so you can go for yeah, I'm letting you go first and you're still mad. Okay.
Okay.
First Amendment. Rachel, go ahead.
I'll explain, and then he can tell me if I'm wrong. So prior to 1970, the vast majority of women did not work full time outside the home. Yes, historically, some women have worked sometimes, but it was never the norm for all women to work. Like he even said, 16% of the labor force was women. During World War II, that temporarily bumped up. It went right back down because women hated it. They'd rather be at home. Mothers working is what we were talking about because of the context of what he said, that women are unhappy, but it's only because they have to juggle work and raising kids and you can't do both. It's hard to do both. Yes, I agree. The reason men's wages have stagnated and been suppressed and have never recovered is because we doubled the labor force by sending all the women to college. Women graduate from college at a far higher rate than men now. They also carry the majority of college debt. So every family is starting with a giant burden of student debt, both parents trying to work, and this is the number one reason people are only having about 1.5 kids now. Okay, so he's wrong. The majority of women did not work until 1970. It was only after the creation of gender studies departments that we shoved and pushed women and told them, you have to have a career, you have to have a career. Being a stay-at-home mom is for losers. So that's why men's wages are not better. It has nothing to do with unions.